Hello again, my lovelies, and welcome back to my channel. I present to you with so much excitement, after a hot minute, Izuku Midoriya's Disastrous Guide to Living a Double Life, Chapter 3, by Leahistyping. No, Dad, I don't use drugs, I make them. I hope you enjoy as much as I do. Izuku wasn't entirely sure where he got his talent for tinkering and creating, but hey, he wasn't complaining. The thought occurred to him when he was scavenging around Tacoba Beach, hoping to find something that could be used as a support item. He was primarily looking for something to aid his progress with the knife situation, but anything that caught his eye wound up in his backpack full of mysteries. He first discovered the beach when he began his training for vigilantism, and it continually proved to be rather useful when he found spare parts that could be used to create the gadgets and tech. The parts for some of his knives? Tacoba. Some of the tech for his computer? Tacoba. His current work in progress smoke bombs? Tacoba. Parts of his vigilante costume, for God's sakes, were scraps from the beach. So Tacoba, of course, was incredibly handy and quite frankly fun, as he never knew what else could wash up on shore. Izuku dug through the piles of metal and scrap, sorting through and analyzing each piece intently before making the decision of if it was worth the hassle to carry home. He still had plenty of time before he began his patrol for the night, but the last thing he wanted was to carry a bunch of junk home after a long night, only for it to never be used. He continued searching mindlessly and picking up random fragments as he hummed some old All Might cartoon, simply letting the fresh salt air enter his lungs. With longer days approaching, the sun was still up, though slowly making its way down the horizon. Izuku had about 20 or so minutes before the pinky oranges of the sky faded into its brilliant blue. As Izuku picked up another piece of scrap metal, appraising it thoroughly and contemplating its usefulness, he heard rustling from a few stacks away. No one was typically at the beach because of the garbage, let alone at this time of day. Gulping, Izuku slowly walked over towards the sound, making sure each step along the pale sand was silent as the last one. He had no idea who it could be, and he sure as hell wasn't taking any chances. Izuku peeked around the corner of a tall stack, his back against a pile of stable rubbish, trying to find who was or what created the odd noise. He scanned the area, and after a few seconds of searching, his eyes caught a slight blur of pink? Wait, Hatsume? Izuku thought as he fully turned the corner and stood behind the girl, who was sorting through a tin of junk, unsuspecting of his arrival. Her eyebrows furrowed lightly, and her lip was pursed in a pout as she considered the current object in her hand. Hatsume, what are you doing here? Izuku exclaimed without thinking, not expecting to run into anyone he knew, let alone on a beach he thought was abandoned. Hatsume looked up from the pile of trash she was scavenging from, her eyes lighting up with excitement when she realized who had called her name. Midoriya! I didn't think I'd see you here! Not many people visit anymore because of the garbage. I could say the same thing about you. Figured UA had all the supplies you'd ever need. Izuku replied, leaning against a sturdy pile of rubbish to his right while crossing his arms over his chest. You got me here. Hatsume laughed as she continued to pick through various metal pieces. But sometimes you just can't beat washed up trash. Izuku snorted, He couldn't help but agree with her, as he had found some incredibly useful parts over the months of scavenging. So, what are you doing here, Midoriya? Hatsume prompted, her curious glint in her eyes. She continued to eye the pieces carefully as she waited for his explanation. Well, you see, Izuku stammered. I do some tinkering on the side too, and I don't really have the money to buy most of it brand new. This was the next best thing, and it's been working out for me so far. He watched as Hatsume's calculating gaze considered his explanation, his fingers fidgeting anxiously. He purposely left out what he did with said projects, though he was unsure if she'd question him further. A tinkerer too? Huh. Hatsume said after a moment of contemplation. Seems I was right about you being someone reliable to collab with. Her eyes lit up brightly as she threw away one of the parts she was previously examining and continued her search throughout the area, Izuku awkwardly following close behind her. What are you working on? Hatsume asked casually, throwing some random part behind her. Izuku ducked his head to the left in order to dodge it. Was she even looking where she was throwing? Opting to ignore her previous action, Izuku replied, Nothing much. I just wanted to add a few new things to this utility belt I'm working on. Nothing too crazy. It wasn't exactly a lie, but it wasn't the truth either. He wasn't sure how much information he could give her yet. Only time would tell her trustworthiness. Though if Izuku had observed anything about the girl, it was that she tended to mind her own business in favor of doing her own thing. What about you? Izuku asked, hoping she wouldn't look too deep into his response when offered to talk about her own creations instead. Huh, something similar actually, Hatsume responded, seemingly unfazed by Izuku's answer. They continued to walk along the beach, Izuku picking up random pieces now and again whenever they caught his eye. Though mine is less personal than yours. Number 2 wanted some upgrades to his suit, so I offered to create a new baby to assist his utility belt. Number 2? Izuku asked, confusion washing over him. Did she always tend to number people when she was too busy to learn names? In the sports festival, Hatsume elaborated as she weighed a random item in her hand. When Izuku didn't respond right away, she playfully rolled her eyes and added, The one you fought? With all the ice and stuff? Oh, she meant Todoroki. Do you not know their names, or do you just not say them out of spite? Izuku asked, half joking. The sun was almost entirely set now. He was lucky that he was able to run into Hatsume before it became completely dark. A quick glance to his watch confirmed that it was little past 8, typically when he started to head back to his house. Depends on the person, Hatsume replied, now fully turning around to face Izuku. I have so many babies on the go that keeping track of other people's names flies off my radar. Referring to them as memorable moments helps me keep track, and even that doesn't always work. Hatsume laughed lightly, finally zipping up her backpack. As an unknown look was settled in Hatsume's curious gaze, something Izuku hadn't expected when she chose to turn around to talk to him face to face. He wasn't even sure if he wanted to find out. Regardless, Hatsume asked, So, what's the deal with the utility belt? Your general ad, which means unless you're preparing for the hero course, you don't exactly have a clear objective. Damn it, so it seemed that she didn't just let things past her. Izuku considered as he debated his situation. He could fully reveal the truth, but no, it's too risky to involve another person at the moment. But if he flat out lied, she would surely know? He didn't have a lot of wriggle room out of this, unfortunately, which meant that his options were pretty limited. With that in mind, he decided, just Just some extracurriculars, that's all. Yeah, that wasn't believable. At all. He really needed to stop getting himself into situations where people he knew came too close to discovering his hobby. First Kacha, now Hatsume. With this luck, Eraser would find out in no time. Hatsume eyed him suspiciously before clicking her tongue. A hobby, huh? Shit. Did she say that out? Did he say that out loud? Don't really. Relax, I won't pry any further. Hatsume assured, placing her hand on his shoulder. Relief washed through Izuku's body. His shoulders visibly slumped from there, where they had previously tensed and his lungs released air he hadn't realized he had been holding. If you want any help, or even tech, don't be afraid to ask. Hatsume winked as she removed her hand from his now slouched shoulder and swung her backpack over her back. I may actually take you up on that. Izuku smiled widely, his eyes lighting up at the offer. As they began to walk off the beach shoulder to shoulder, Izuku continued to grin. He had finally started making some friends, some he could rely on and trust without thinking. So Izuku asked, Hey, have you heard of knife sheaths that effectively carry liquids? Hatsume's eyes found Izuku's, a curious smile spreading across her face. I haven't, but now you've got me hooked. Have any designs on hand? They were on the sidewalk now, and Izuku forgot how nice the solidness of concrete was in comparison to uneven sandy beaches. He reached into his backpack to grab his notebook and flip to the right page, careful to avoid any other pages that would be considered incriminating. You could never be too careful. Of course, so here's what I was thinking. A few hours later found Karma beginning his patrol. The night was nicer than usual, a clear sign that summer was rapidly approaching. Soon summer break would arrive, giving Karma much better hours for his patrol schedule, while also allowing him some additional free time to upgrade gear. After letting excitement get the better of him, Karma had accidentally spilled to Hatsume his current project, one in which she seemed just as interested in. After a sworn secrecy and an enthusiastic promise, Karma had reluctantly given her a spare copy of his designs. They had figured that if they both made the test model, they could add each other's ideas to make an ideal finished product. It made sense in theory, though Karma was still anxious regardless. He just had to hope that Hatsume would be able to keep this project relatively quiet. He really didn't need the UA admins digging into his personal life or getting suspicious. As his mind drifted to his newest upgrades, his other situation resurfaced. Right. I have to tell All Might my decision. Stopping on the nearest rooftop, Karma pulled out his phone and sat down on the edge. He let his legs dangle over the ledge, idly swinging them back and forth. It was typically pretty quiet this time of night, so Karma wasn't too worried about any trouble. As Karma created a new conversation, his thumbs hovered over the keyboard. What should he say? Just a simple, I'll do it? Or is additional context needed? All Might probably didn't have his number, so it would be best to introduce himself first. A few more seconds of pondering, Karma typed out his message and sent it quickly, not wanting to overthink his response. New message. Hello, All Might? This is Izuku Midoriya, the one you talked to after the sports festival. I wanted to inform you of my choice, that being that I accept your offer. Thank you again for this opportunity. Turning off his phone, Karma sighed in relief. At least the stress of his decision was no longer an issue. He pocketed his phone in a hidden compartment and continued along the rooftops, careful not to make any noise. The last few weeks had been going pretty smoothly, save for the blackjack incident. His additional training with Shinzo seemed to be paying off, as taking down criminals had begun to feel easier and easier as the days progressed. His train of thought didn't last long, however, as a deafening scream echoed through the streets, a couple of allies over. Karma sped up his pace to get to the scene as quickly as possible, his legs thrumming from the anticipation he was leading himself to. When he arrived, he peeked his head over the ledge, careful to avoid being spotted. There were 4 men that he was able to see, though he doubted that anyone else was involved. One was on the ground, sporting various wounds and whimpering in pain. It seemed like a deal gone wrong, Karma concluded as the 3 men argued amongst themselves. Karma slowly started to descend down to the nearest fire escape, staying in the shadows so he wouldn't be seen. All of the men sported a similar appearance, though the lack of light may have had an impact on that. Their eyes were dark and scruffy stubble covered their face. They all seemed rather annoyed due to whatever they were arguing about under mumbled breaths. One man in particular piqued Karma's interest, as he had a unique tattoo located on the side of his neck. Could it be some sort of gang affiliations? If things went all right, he should be done with them relatively quick, though things more often than not ever seemed to go his way. Using the darkness of the ally as a shield, Karma inched his way behind the nearest garbage bin, and with a deep inhale, he struck. Beginning with the man who had his back faced towards the vigilante, Karma charged towards him, quickly and effortlessly knocked him to his knees. The other 2 men stared at him, surprised by the unexpected guests, and lifted their guns ready to fire. Karma dodged to the side and kicked the gun out of the nearer man's hand. It flew through the air and promptly crashed against the brick alley wall, shattering to pieces in seconds. "You son of a—" the weaponless man began, but was cut off as Karma bolted towards him without a second thought, using his body as a shield from the final man. He threw the man towards the final standing opponent and watched as they crashed against the nearest dumpster, heads slightly spinning. He kicked the man who was still on his knees to ensure that he stayed down, whispering a quiet, "Stay down." "What was that?" he asked mockingly as he approached the duo sitting against the dumpster. Karma looked to his right and noticed the 4th man, who seemed to be their victim, watching closely. He deduced that he wouldn't be much of a threat, at least at the moment. Neither of them answered his question, both opting to stare at him with daggers. If looks could kill, he noticed as one of them eyed the other intact gun, which sat a few feet away from them, and used the opportunity of them staying still to crush it under his feet. He was not dealing with a bullet wound today, thank you very much, and he knew Eraser wouldn't let him hear the end of it. "Now, care to explain what's going on, or am I going to have to beat it out of you?" Karma asked indifferently. Was it a bluff? Absolutely. Did it still scare some petty criminals shitless? Absolutely. "Not that it's any of your damn business, but that bitch over there owes us money. So if you know what's good for you, you'll let us finish our job." The man with the neck tattoo scoffs, unamused with their current situation. "It becomes my business when you disturb my streets. Got that?" Karma retorted with a scoff of his own. Who did some criminals think they were, with their need to ruin quiet nights like these with their petty disagreements? "Your streets, huh?" the man asked, clearly entertained. "Since when do pipsqueaks like you run things? Shouldn't you be at home doing your homework or some shit?" This conversation was quickly getting off topic. So with a sigh, Karma pulled his knife from his sheath located on his thigh, right hip, and proceeded to dip the tip of it into a small container. There he grabbed from his belt. Trying to tie all 4 of them up without one fighting back would be difficult, especially if he wanted to keep them conscious, so testing his latest project seemed like a reasonable course of action. Okay, here's how we're going to do this. Karma began pacing back and forth slowly. Tell me what's going on, and I'll use little Viridian luck, he said, waving his small capsule in front of their face. Don't, and well, I'll use Midnight's Eclipse. You named your shit? Jesus, you're a nerd. The man with the tattoo barked out a laugh, and Karma couldn't stop the mortified flush that spread across his cheeks. Okay, maybe he shouldn't say their names out loud. Shut up! Forget I said anything about that. Karma stuttered as he let the embarrassment get to him. Just tell me what you're doing and I won't put you to sleep. He tried instead. Yeah, and what are you gonna do? Before the man could finish his sentence, Karma used his knife to slice across the expanse of his forearm, leaving a clean cut a few inches above his wrist. What the hell did you do that for? The man yelled as he grasped his injured arm. It trembled slightly and he gritted his teeth harshly as he continued to glare daggers at the vigilante. Karma sighed heavily, a simple technique he used to reel in his annoyance. It seemed rather obvious what he had done, but I suppose he shouldn't have overestimated some lousy criminals. Tying you up while you're conscious would be too much of a hassle for me, and by running your big mouth you made yourself the example. Karma narrowed his eyes and smirked as he watched confusion filter through the man's features. About 20 seconds of the men looking at each other bewildered later, the toxin came into effect, and right before Karma's eyes, he saw his creation activate. The leader toppled over, confusion written across his features as his face collided with the floor. What the hell did you do to him? The other 2 shrieked, in unison terrified of their leader's defeat. I told you already, assholes, Karma replied, rolling his eyes. Now, don't make my job any harder and put your hands behind your back. As one of the men sighed in defeat and put his hands behind his back, the other one sneered with disgust, his blood boiling with pure rage. I'll kill you! He shouted as he lunged at Karma, quirk activating in the process. It seemed to be some sort of hardening quirk similar to Kirishima's, though much weaker than the redhead's. Seriously? Karma asked, undoubtedly annoyed with the man's choice to remain difficult. You guys are starting to be a pain in my... Before he could finish his sentence, the man's quirk seemingly vanished, long, white bandages wrapped tightly around his body. There was only one person who could do that, Karma thought as he looked towards the source, none other than Eraserhead. Karma's smile widened at the sight of his mentor. He had left so abruptly last night, so it was nice to see him again. Surrender already! Eraser yelled as the man still tied in his bandages. The other one looked around in absolute disbelief, and Karma used the opportunity to finish cuffing him with some simple zip ties. Hey, it's not like he could actually buy handcuffs. He'd go broke after a week of patrolling. Ties were surprisingly effective, especially when the person tied up was already knocked out or weakened to a point that they wouldn't be able to break out. Finally, the man stopped squirming and allowed himself to be lowered by Eraser's scarf. As all 3 men were tied up and placed against the wall, Karma approached the other man, who was still whining in pain. Do you need help, sir? Karma asked sweetly, extending his hand to help the other stand. The man looked at him apprehensively, likely nervous due to his previous attacks by the other man. I'm fine, no worries, he answered nonchalantly as he took the vigilante's hand and rose to his feet. Why were you being attacked by them? Karma asked with narrowed eyes. Just because he was being attacked by criminals didn't mean he was out of the woods just yet. Well, I owe them a bit of money, the man replied, defeat evident in his, not only in his voice, but in his body too. My daughter, she just had a major operation done, and now I can barely afford to buy her dinner. I figured if I loaned some of their money and worked harder than usual, I'd be able to pay it back in time. Unfortunately, they wanted it early. I see. Karma hummed as he considered the situation. Do you have any food for her tomorrow? The man looked even more broken than before as he shook his head slowly. Karma sighed to himself, sad to see someone struggling so much that they couldn't even afford food for their children. Here, Karma said as he reached into one of his side pockets and pulled out 1,000 yen. He'd have to ration a bit longer until his next side job or take the extra during lunch at UA, but a little girl was starving. I don't need it much anyways. Buy your daughter something for breakfast tomorrow. Oh no, I can't accept this, the man replied, shocked by the offer. His arms waved in front of him, hoping it would stop the vigilante from offering. No, I insist, Karma said in turn, grabbing his hands and placing the money inside. Kids need food to grow healthy, and she has to recover, yeah? Get her what she needs. Thank you so much, sir. The man was on the verge of tears now, overwhelmed by the act of kindness. The only thing I ask in return is to wait for the police so you can answer any questions they have about tonight. We didn't see the whole thing, and having a witness will increase the chances that they'll be put away for good. Karma added for good measure. Most victims agreed to comply with police investigations, though he wanted to ensure that the man was able to effectively describe what had transpired. I can do that, the man said, sounding relieved. Thank you so much again, sir. It's my pleasure. Karma smiled as he waved one last time and made his way over to Eraser, who was quietly waiting near the criminals. The cops are already on their way, so they should be here shortly, Eraser said as he fiddled with his scarf. Okay, I'll head out then now, and we can meet up later, Karma replied, already beginning to use the fire escapes to climb the alley wall. Eraser nodded in response as Karma headed a few streets away from where the cops were going to be. About 15 minutes later, Eraser had joined Karma at the edge of one of the taller buildings in the area. The fall wouldn't kill him if he jumped, but anyone walking on the streets wouldn't spot him easily either. That was awfully kind of you back there, Eraser commented as he sat down next to the vigilante. I just wanted to help the little girl out. No child should be forced to starve, Karma replied casually. Still, it was very heroic. Eraser eyed Karma carefully, curious to see the boy's reaction as he considered their conversation from the previous night. Karma snorted as he made Eraser's eye contact. He knew what Eraser was hinting at, but felt generous enough to not make another jab at the hero when he was complimenting him. Thanks, Razor, he mumbled quietly as a small smile formed on his lips. No problem, kid, Eraser replied gruffly, ruffling the vigilante's hooded head. Sometimes it amazed the hero that they'd gone so long with him seeing close to nothing of the vigilante's head. Though considering Karma's personality, he's not entirely surprised at how well thought out his plan was. Now, oh god, that's his serious voice. Don't think I didn't see your little squabble with those guys. Now what the hell are Viridian Eclipse and Midnight's Lock? Eraser's tone was stern, though not even he could hide the slightest amusement when the about the kid naming his inventions. Okay, 1. The Viridian Lock at Midnight's Eclipse, asshole! Karma scoffed while rolling his eyes. They're not that difficult. And 2, it's none of your business, and they're still prototypes, he added matter-of-factly. Eraser rolled his eyes in response to the vigilante's evasion and replied, "This is my business when you're utilizing tools that resemble a quirk. Finally really revealing it to me?" Karma wasn't sure if panicking or laughing in Eraser's face was a better idea. On one hand, if the hero suspected that he was using his quirk during nightly strolls, he would no doubt shut down his little operation by arresting him. On the other hand, was Eraser truly dense enough that he'd seriously believe that Karma was finally sharing his cards with him? In the end, Karma does his specialty, nonchalance. "Like I'd ever show you my quirk," Karma snorted. "They're just some mixtures I've been working on. No big deal." He leaned back on the palms resting behind him and looked up towards the sky, hoping Eraser wouldn't make a big deal about it. Unfortunately, his mentor had never not made a big deal when it came to the vigilante's extracurricular activities. Mixtures. Eraser raised his eyebrow in something Karma couldn't quite decipher if it was concern or pure curiosity. As in, drugs. His body jolted up and panic swam through his body at the accusation, and Karma knew if he wasn't wearing his goggles, the hero would be met with his eyes being comically wide in surprise. "How many times do I have to tell you, old man? I don't mess with that kind of crap. It's all natural, I swear!" Karma exclaimed, his voice raising an octave higher than usual. He didn't know why he was so antsy about the idea. He had nothing to hide, but it was something he clearly had to work on if he wanted to keep his vigilante act. "So many insults tonight," Eraser questioned lowly, "and you do realize that plenty of drugs come from natural ingredients?" "Only 'cause you keep saying dumb stuff," Karma mumbled, not entirely caring if the hero heard him or not. "And like I said, I don't mess with anything like that." Karma sighed as he looked up towards his mentor. "Just trust me, okay?" Eraser was quiet for a bit, probably considering the vigilante's plea. Contrary to his class's belief, he could be quite merciful at times. "Fine," Eraser huffed, watching a smile, as a smile was surely rising under Karma's mask. "However," he began, before the vigilante got too excited, "don't think this is the last time I'll ask about this. I'm not letting this go that easily." "Wouldn't expect any less from you, Eraser," Karma replied as he continued to grin. They sat in silence for a few minutes, something that Karma noticed they did pretty often. He never once minded it. Okay, maybe a bit at first when it felt like Eraser was watching him like a hawk, but he's learned to live with the feeling. After a moment or two of silence, Eraser finally said, "So, did you get the perspective you were looking for? You left in quite a hurry." Eraser continued to look up at the sky, his eyes scanning over the minuscule amount of stars that were seen due to the light pollution of a busy city. Karma pondered the best way to respond to such a question, as he really didn't feel like being chewed out for interacting with a more dangerous and unpredictable vigilante. Karma had surprisingly mixed feelings about Stain, and he was sure that his own vigilante status played a role in that. On one hand, Stain clearly felt like he was doing a service to society, and it wasn't like he was directly harming innocent civilians. On the other hand, he didn't have a right to choose which heroes live or die. Either way, though, what Eraser didn't know wouldn't hurt him. Yeah. Karma smiled, his gaze meeting Eraser's, when the hero turned to look at him. "I think I did." The week following the events of the sports festival was relatively chaotic for Izuku and his side jobs. He was messaging with Shinso and Hatsume pretty regularly now, even if it did feel like it was primarily for training and tech design. Despite the sports festival being over, Shinso insisted that they continue training together, regardless of the fact that Shinso had received offers to do additional training for the hero course. Turns out Eraser had offered to mentor Shinso, and Izuku could almost chuckle at the irony of him mentoring both of them without even realizing it. Similarly, he and Hatsume had been messaging quite often, as Hatsume had been hard at work tinkering with Izuku's latest model. Although Izuku would argue that his weapon designs usually had the edge. He couldn't compare to the raw natural abilities that Hatsume had to create new weapons. There were, of course, the many times that Izuku would sneak into the lab to collaborate and brainstorm with Hatsume. But he couldn't deny that she was doing a lot of it. He appreciated it deeply, as it gave him more time to focus on actually being out in the city. Crime had slowly been increasing throughout the past few weeks, likely because of the USJ incident. On top of that, Kachan had been keeping his distance since their run-in at the forest, though Izuku couldn't help but feel the pair of eyes that often found him in places around campus. He was worried that Kachan would confront him again soon, but he figured he'd cross that bridge when he got there. There's still so much I gotta do, Izuku thought as he waited outside of the room he had met All Might in about a week ago. He and the hero had scheduled another meeting to discuss a plan moving forward regarding the inheritance of One for All. Izuku was still surprised that he was awarded the knowledge of such an important secret, but he figured that All Might would have had to tell someone eventually if he wanted to pass on his power. So he tried not to think about it too hard. "Young Midoriya," All Might called as he approached the room. "I'm so glad you could make it." Izuku felt a little lightheaded at the fact that his favorite hero was glad to meet him, but he attempted to keep the fanboying to himself until he was alone. "Thank you for setting this up. I can't wait to talk with you." All Might nodded in response and slid open the door next to him. He gestured for Izuku to enter and promptly followed behind him as Izuku took a seat. He threw his hands neatly in his lap and waited patiently for All Might to start the conversation. Finally, All Might said, "So, young Midoriya, how have you been?" "Not bad. Thank you for asking," Izuku replied cheerfully. "I've been using the last week to rewatch the footage of the sports festival and take notes on some of the techniques I noticed. It helps me to get a better sense of what I need to improve on or how to counter them in the future fights." Although Izuku did this every year, it had felt so much different knowing that he had actually fought some of them himself. "I love your enthusiasm." All Might smiled brightly. "It's not every day we get a student with as much drive and passion as you." Izuku couldn't stop the grin that spread across his face at the amount of approval that All Might was giving him. He never would have dreamed that one day he'd be mentored by both Eraserhead and All Might. "Thank you so much, All Might, but what did you want to talk about?" "All right," All Might laughed. "Before I can pass One for All over to you, we need to make sure that your body is ready for it. Passing it too early could make your limbs fly off your body." All Might spoke very animatedly, and it was funny to watch as he constantly switched between serious and upbeat. "Yeah, we wouldn't want that." Izuku chuckled, nervous about the prospect of having his limbs blown off. "What do you suggest?" "I'm glad you asked. Based on your performance on the sports festival, you already seem to be in pretty decent shape. So I and the other teachers were thinking that you could join the hero course for training this summer. That way, you could get a feel for how the hero course operates and continue to bulk up. Then, after the summer break, you'll be ready to inherit it, and we can use term 2 to prepare you for the entrance of the hero course. All Might explained. He was similar to Izuku in the way that he was constantly using his hands to navigate the conversation. Izuku almost laughed at the comparison. That sounds fun. Would we just be training here over the summer? Izuku asked. He could work with that, though he knew he'd just be extra tired during his patrols. I can't share many details yet, but as far as I know, the teachers are putting together a summer camp getaway to ensure you students are able to focus without the threat of villains. All Might said, momentarily whispering like he was sharing a massive secret. No patrols for most of summer break. Izuku was sure he could do it, but he wasn't going to like it. His patrols were one of the reasons why he was able to stay sane. It was an outlet for his frustrations, and he liked knowing he was protecting people every night. Would he be able to sleep knowing that people were being hurt and he wasn't there to stop it? Would your parents be okay with this? All Might ask, breaking Izuku out of his train of thought. Oh, right. He forgot that others didn't know about his living situation. And for good reason, obviously. Yeah, they wouldn't mind at all, Izuku said half-heartedly, watching as All Might smiled approvingly. Heyo, Midoriya! Hatsume called as Izuku entered her laboratory, waving excitedly as she used her other hand to continue tinkering with whatever toy she was working on. A few days after Izuku's talk with All Might, Hatsume had messaged Izuku with good news. She had finally got the prototype for his knife sheaths completed and wanted Izuku's input for future models. Hi Hatsume, nice to see you again. How's it going? Izuku asked cheerfully as he walked past a number of past projects that Hatsume had been playing around with. Really awesome, actually, Hatsume said as she fully turned in her swivel chair. I've been working hard on these knife sheaths, and I can't wait for you to take a look. I can't wait to see. I have no doubts that you went beyond what I had in mind, Izuku replied, taking a seat in the chair next to her. One of the things that Izuku liked best about Hatsume was her ability to completely outdo herself in everything that she did. It was honestly admirable. You flatter me too much! Hatsume laughed as she started digging through one of her drawers. Hatsume was the definition of organized chaos, and considering that Izuku was usually the same way, he couldn't even judge. It was mesmerizing to see how everything had a place and purpose, even if it looked like a common junk drawer to anyone else. Finally, Hatsume pulled out a long tin box and proudly presented it in front of Izuku. Give me your honest thoughts. I want our baby to be perfect, Hatsume said, her face a combination of determination and amusement. Izuku still found it comical how Hatsume referred to her creations as babies, but it made sense in hindsight. They both spent so many shared hours collabing and brainstorming to create these sheaths, so it's no surprise how proud they both were of their work. Uncovering the box, Izuku was met with two identical knife sheaths. They were thick and sturdy, and its base was see-through, making it easy to identify how much liquid was in it. The top part had a black lid which ensured that none of the poison would leak out onto his suit. Each side of the lid held a clasp that held knives in place, though they were simple enough that they could be undone in mere seconds that Izuku was reaching for them. Overall, they were everything Izuku dreamed about and more, and he was so grateful that he found such an amazing person to work on his creations with. I know the clarity might be an issue for opponents because you can clearly see inside, but I figured you can always slide them into some cloth to hide it, you know? Hatsume said as she carefully watched Izuku's reaction. Other than that, I think that the final details really added to our blended design, and it'll be super epic in battle. Izuku continued to stare at the sheaths in his hands, and he couldn't bring himself to look away. This was the next step to getting stronger, and he was so ecstatic that he could start officially incorporating them into his fighting style. I love these so much, Hatsume. Izuku replied ecstatically. His face was starting to hurt from the smile plastered on his face. He still couldn't believe how well their collaboration worked out. This is everything I could have ever wanted. Thank you so much. Hatsume matched his massive grin and proudly said, I'm so glad. Let me know the next time you have something else you want to make. I had a blast working with you. Getting used to fully integrating his knives into a new fighting style took some getting used to. Although he had been using them since the beginning of his patrols, they were primarily used as a backup in case things went south with basic fist fighting. But as the days went on, Karma started to face new people much stronger than him, and he knew that the only way to beat them was to evolve his fighting style. On top of that, he had 3 sets, each on one of his thighs, where his special ones were. 2 on each side right above his ankles, which were primarily for throwing, and 2 snugly held on either side of his utility belt. You may also have 1 or 2 hidden around his torso, but those were really just for emergencies. After about a week of getting used to the feeling and various minor slip-ups during random fights, he was starting to become extremely confident in his abilities. Now, obviously he wasn't using his knives on some petty crooks who could be taken out in one punch, but the increase in crime lately had created a whole new wave of criminals for Karma to practice with. Eraser had begun to question his increased use of knives, as it wasn't something he usually saw with the vigilante. The quicker and not lethal takedowns were noticeable, so Karma figured he was fine with them as long as criminals weren't getting seriously injured for committing petty crimes. Due to his newfound abilities and confidence, Karma wanted to thank Stain for his life-altering advice. He still couldn't believe that he had run into the hero killer of all people, but he was thankful that he did, given he basically started using a rip-off of the vigilante's quirk. Considering how the hero killer moved, Karma figured he'd still be in Hosu, so before his patrol one night, he hopped on a train and headed over in hopes of locating him. The train ride was relatively normal, with no interruptions occurring while he was riding over. He was in his civilian clothes to lower suspicion, so all he needed was a quick outfit swap in an alley once he arrived. However, once he got to Hosu, he was horrified to see some of the buildings up in flames and those weird monster dinosaur-looking figures flying through the air and wreaking unadulterated havoc on the civilians and heroes on the scene. Karma truly wanted to assist in getting people to safety, but he knew it was far too dangerous to be out when multiple top heroes could arrive at any minute. Wait, top heroes? In Hosu? Right now? Well, shit! After quickly switching into his vigilante suit, Karma sprinted towards the back alleys away from where all the fighting was. He eyed each one carefully but quickly, ensuring that every area was covered before moving on. If his hunch was correct, then that would mean... As Karma turned the corner, he was horrified to see Pro-Hero Native and Ingenium covered in blood, with the hero killer standing over them menacingly. But wait, wasn't Ingenium sent to the hospital a couple of weeks ago because of Stain? There's no way he went back to fight him again, right? Squinting his eyes in an attempt to get a better look, Karma noticed how Ingenium's mask was knocked off and the person underneath looked far too young to be a pro-hero. Was that Ida from the hero course? Karma's blood ran cold at the realization. Why was he here? Was he related to Ingenium or something? Too many unanswered questions swarmed Karma's head, and he barely had time to dodge as a knife was thrown in his direction. He jumped to the side, narrowly dodging the attack, and looked up to see Stain smiling maniacally in his direction. "Nice dodge, kid," Stain said, slightly tightening the grip he had around Native's neck. "But if you want to live, I suggest you pretend you didn't see anything. You know how I feel about people impeding me from my work." Well, that's cliffhanger. Well, not a big one, but you know what I mean. I am so glad that Leahistyping allowed me to do this fanfiction all those weeks ago, months at this point, and I hope their studies in university go well. I can't wait for the next chapter. Also, in the words of our dear rat overlord, go get something to drink, get a snack, and take a break. You deserve a break. Until the next time, go give Leahistyping all the kudos they deserve for their amazing story writing. You will find the link in the description. And until next time, I love you all. Bye bye.